picture this. You have a massive steel-hulled oil tanker.
Right.
And it's carrying millions of barrels of crude oil, slowly navigating a narrow, ancient waterway. I mean, it is heavy. It is incredibly slow.
It's bound by physics.
Exactly. Its movement is entirely subject to the weather, to geopolitics, and to the very real threat of physical violence. It is bound by the absolute, unforgiving laws of physics.
Right. It is the ultimate manifestation of mass and drag. You literally cannot move it any faster than the physical world allows.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, hold that image in your head and contrast it with, say, a fiber optic cable running along the ocean floor.
Okay.
Inside that cable, a pulse of light carrying billions of pieces of data, maybe an AI-generated rendering, maybe a high-frequency financial transaction, is moving at roughly 200,000 kilometers per second.
Which is practically weightless.
It's virtually weightless.
Yeah.
It cares absolutely nothing for a storm on the surface. It is, for all intents and purposes, entirely frictionless.
It's the dream of the digital age realized, really. Pure, uncapped ambition, moving at the speed of light, entirely divorced from the mud and the friction of the physical earth.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a massive stack of sources in front of us today, spanning articles, market research, and geopolitical intelligence.
It's a heavy stack.
It is. And honestly, when I first laid all these materials out on the desk, they seemed completely, totally disconnected.
Right. They seem all over the place.
I mean, we are looking at reports on a hot war in the Middle East and global oil spikes. And then right next to that, we have the granular details on a $1 trillion, yes, with a key infrastructure boom in artificial intelligence.
Which is a staggering number.
It really is.
Yeah.
Then we have research on a bizarre, creeping new workplace crisis that behavioral scientists are calling work slop. We've got the latest from the Oscars, and we've even got a fascinating demographic shift involving a massive boom in female plumbers and diesel mechanics.
I know it sounds like a random assortment of headlines just thrown into a blender. But there is a profound unifying theme here. If you look closely at the underlying mechanics of all these stories, they are all telling the exact same narrative.
Okay, let's unpack this.
The connective tissue running through all of this source material today is friction.
Friction.
Right. We are currently living through a moment of unprecedented collision. On one side of the equation, we're seeing massive, historic physical friction. Hot wars, crippled supply chains, travel chaos, and, total institutional gridlock in Washington, D.C.
The physical world is pushing back.
It is pushing back hard.
Right.
And that physical friction is colliding directly with the frictionless, uncapped, almost utopian ambitions of the digital world, specifically the explosion of AI and cloud computing.
And before you ask yourself why you should care about this high-level philosophical collision, let me make it very real for you.
Because it hits close to home.
It does. Because this friction isn't just happening in the abstract. It's not just theoretical. It is actively, directly reshaping your retirement portfolio right this second. It's dictating whether your next family vacation is going to be a relaxing getaway or an absolute logistical nightmare. It's changing the very tools you are forced to use at your desk job. And, it's even dictating the types of movies that are being greenlit for you to watch on a Friday night.
We are essentially watching the physical world and the digital world enter a very tense, very high-stakes negotiation over who actually runs the future.
Right.
And right now, the physical world is reminding everyone that it still holds the keys.
Which brings us to our very first piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Because before we can even begin to talk about the digital world, the cloud, and, infinite computing power, we have to look at the physical energy that powers all of it.
Thread.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And right now, in early 2026, that physical energy is sitting squarely at the ultimate global choke point.
You're talking about the Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz. Let me give you the raw numbers from our reporting.
Yeah.
U.S. crude oil has now surpassed $100 a barrel. Right. The international benchmark, Brent crude, is also sitting comfortably over $100. And the catalyst for this price spike is incredibly kinetic. The U.S. and Israel are engaged in a hot war with Iran.
But the strategic focus of this conflict isn't just generalized warfare.
No, it's not.
It has zeroed in specifically on Iranian military assets located on Karg Island.
And we have to stop and explain why Karg Island matters so much, because it's not just a random dot on the map, is it?
Not at all. It's not just a military outpost. Located about 15 miles off the coast of Iran in the northern Persian Gulf, this single, relatively small island is responsible for handling roughly 90% of Iran's total oil exports.
90%. Wow.
It is the beating heart of their economic lifeblood. If you control or threaten Karg Island, you control the Iranian economy.
And the rhetoric is escalating to match that reality. I mean, President Trump has explicitly threatened to hit that energy infrastructure, to actually bomb the oil facilities if Iran continues its attempts to block the Strait of Hormuz.
Which is a massive threat.
Right. Now, for anyone who needs a quick geography refresher, the Strait of Hormuz is the narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. It typically carries about 20% of the entire world's oil supply every single day.
It is the jugular vein of the global economy.
That's a great way to put it.
If that vein is squeezed even a little bit, the entire world feels the blood pressure drop immediately.
And we are feeling it. The panic in the energy markets is so severe right now that we are witnessing a historic intervention.
The IEA release.
Yes, the International Energy Agency, the IEA, is currently leading a massive coordinated effort to release 400 million barrels of stockpiled emergency oil into the open market.
Just to put that in perspective, the U.S. alone is tapping into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to release 172 million of those barrels.
But that feels like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, right? You're just dumping stored oil to soften the price shock today.
It's a temporary fix.
Exactly. But here is where the absolute friction of the physical world really becomes apparent. You can't just snap your fingers and secure a maritime choke point like the Strait of Hormuz.
No, you need physical ships.
You need navies. You need a coordinated international coalition to guard those waters. And according to the sources we're looking at, President Trump is expressing deep, mounting frustration because that coalition is struggling incredibly hard to come together.
It's a logistical and political nightmare. What's fascinating here is the stark divergence in enthusiasm among traditional U.S. allies.
Yeah, let's break that down.
You have the UK's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who has been highly hesitant to send aircraft carriers to the region, pointing out that reopening the strait is, quote, not a simple task.
Not a simple task at all.
Then you look at France. Emmanuel Macron has deployed a carrier strike group, but the French Foreign Ministry was very, very quick to clarify to the press that it is strictly in a defensive posture.
So they don't want to engage.
Right. They want no part of offensive operations. Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has flat out refused to participate in any naval mission as long as the war continues, citing a lack of consultation before the conflict even began.
That's a pretty big fracture in the alliance.
It is. Even Japan, which is historically a crucial ally and heavily dependent on Middle Eastern oil, has stated they currently have no plans to send escort vessels.
So the allies are dragging their feet, pointing fingers, or just hiding behind defensive posturing. And it's not just the allies who are strained. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright openly admitted in our sources that the U.S. Navy simply isn't ready to start escorting commercial ships yet.
They're spread too thin.
Exactly. All of the available military assets in the region are currently tied up, focusing on destroying Iran's offensive capabilities. So the commercial ships are essentially stuck. They have no escort.
They're just sitting targets.
Right. But wait, this brings up something from the reporting that completely scrambled my brain when I first read it.
You're referring to the Treasury Secretary's comments in Paris.
Yes. Okay, so Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent gave an interview, and he confirmed two very strange, seemingly contradictory things.
Go on.
First, he said the U.S. has no plans to intervene directly in oil commodities markets to artificially lower prices.
Yeah.
He actually stated he's not even sure under what authority the government could legally do that.
Fair enough.
But second, and far more importantly, he revealed that the U.S. military is actually allowing Iranian oil tankers out of the Strait of Hormuz. They are intentionally letting them pass through to supply India and China.
It sounds crazy.
It does. So, wait, explain this to me. We are fighting a hot war with a nation. We are bombing their military assets on the very island where they export their oil. But we are explicitly allowing their primary economic export out onto the open water to stabilize global markets.
Yeah.
How does that paradox work?
It is the ultimate paradox of the modern, hyper-connected world. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are looking at the incredibly delicate, razor-thin edge of modern economic warfare. The goal of the U.S. administration here is to defang a hostile military regime. But they are absolutely terrified of triggering a global recession in the process.
Because of the oil prices.
Look at the math. Oil at $100 a barrel is painful for consumers, but oil at $150 or $200 a barrel, which commodities analysts warn is highly possible if the strait remains fully 100% closed, that doesn't just hurt, It destroys economy.
It causes a complete meltdown.
It causes massive cascading defaults. So the U.S. is fighting a kinetic war with missiles and drones while simultaneously trying to micromanage a global commodities market.
Oh.
They are letting Iranian oil flow to China and India simply because the global market desperately needs those 1.5 million barrels a day to avoid a total catastrophic price collapse.
It's like putting someone in a chokehold, but intentionally leaving their airway open just a tiny fraction of an inch so they don't pass out and collapse all their dead weight on top of you.
Yeah.
You're trying to win the fight without having to carry the body.
That is a very visceral way to put it, but mechanically, yes, that is exactly what is happening.
Jeez.
And this geopolitical friction is so thick, so all-consuming, that it is disrupting diplomacy at the absolute highest levels. Secretary Bessent noted that the highly anticipated summit between President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping, which was scheduled for late March or early April, might be delayed.
Delayed over the war.
Yes. And it's not being delayed because of complex trade disputes or tariff negotiations. It might be delayed simply because the physical logistics of the president leaving Washington, D.C. while managing this escalating war might be impossible. The physical reality of the conflict is anchoring him to the Capitol.
And the economic fallout of all this friction is incredibly real for the average person. I mean, we have David Zervos, the chief market strategist at Jefferies, warning that Federal Reserve policy is already highly restrictive.
I've been tightening for a while.
Right, the Fed has spent the last couple of years trying to cool the economy, actively feeding negative demand to fight inflation. When you suddenly drop a $100 global oil spike on top of an already restrictive economic environment, it complicates everything.
It's a worst-case scenario for the Fed.
It makes inflation infinitely harder to kill because the cost of moving every single good on Earth just went up, and it dramatically raises the risk of a severe economic downturn.
Precisely. The physical world, the literal geographic location of an island, the narrow width of a waterway, the physical need for liquid diesel to move trucks across a highway is imposing an absolute hard limit on theoretical economic models.
And I want to make sure we ground this, because that geopolitical friction doesn't just stay in the Middle East. It doesn't just live on a trading desk on Wall Street or, in a briefing room at the Pentagon. It ripples directly and aggressively into your daily life. Specifically, if you, the listener, are trying to travel anywhere right now, we are going to move from the macro friction of the globe to the micro friction of your next flight. Let's look at what the top travel experts are currently calling a worst-case scenario for travel unpredictability.
It truly is a perfect storm of compounding logistical bottlenecks.
Compounding is the exact right word. Let's look at the sheer volume of disruptions piling up simultaneously in the first quarter of 2026. First, you have the Iran war disrupting global airspace.
Right, they have to reroute everything.
We have seen reports of Emirates flights literally executing U-turns mid-air due to sudden airspace closures over the Middle East. Then, entirely separately, you have intense cartel violence in Mexico, severely disrupting tourism and travel in North America.
It's incredibly volatile down there.
It is. You have a newly launched U.S. military operation in Venezuela. You have massive, paralyzing late-season blizzards hammering the east coast of the United States.
Just one thing after another.
And on top of all of those external factors, you have an internal crisis. An ongoing Department of Homeland Security shutdown that is causing absolute massive bottlenecks and hour-long delays at TSA checkpoints nationwide.
When you look at the entire board, the friction in the system is simply too high. Travel advisors and our sources highlight experts like Sofia Markovich, Amalia Lazaroff, and Margie Hand are looking at this chaotic landscape, and they are telling their high-end clients that the old rules of booking a vacation simply no longer apply.
The old rules are dead.
They really are. You can no longer assume that point A seamlessly connects to point B without a disruption. The system has zero slack left in it.
So if you are listening to this and you have a trip planned, maybe a spring break trip, maybe a business conference, what are the actual actionable strategies here? How do you navigate this mess without losing your mind or your money?
You have to be incredibly defensive.
Well, the experts are advising a few crucial non-negotiable things. First, avoid layovers. And I'm quoting them directly here, like the plague.
And this isn't just a preference for convenience. This is a mathematical risk assessment.
Walk us through that math.
According to Google Flights data, booking a layover saves you about 22% on average compared to a direct flight. In a normal, low-friction world, taking that 22% discount is a smart financial move.
Yeah, everyone does it.
But right now, in early 2026, you are trading a 22% discount for a massive exponential increase in the probability of getting stranded in a connecting city. Because the system has no slack, if your first flight is delayed by 30 minutes due to a localized storm or because the crew was stuck in a TSA bottleneck, you miss that connection.
And then you're just stuck.
And because airlines have reduced capacity, there might not be another flight for 2 days.
Right. It's just not worth the gamble. Sofia Markovich, one of the advisors in our sources, says she will literally drive 2.5 hours to the Atlanta airport just to ensure she can get a non-stop flight rather than risking a connection out of a smaller regional airport.
That makes perfect sense.
If you absolutely must connect, if there is literally no direct option, the firm advice is to leave a massive 3 to 4 hour buffer between your flights. Do not book a 45-minute layover in this environment.
It is financial suicide.
It really is. And make sure before you book that there are multiple later flights to your destination that same day, just as a backup plan. Okay, the second strategy the experts are pounding the table on. Ticket types. Stop buying basic economy.
It comes down to purchasing flexibility. In a frictionless world, basic economy makes perfect sense. You trade optionality for the absolute lowest price. But in a high-friction world, you need an escape hatch.
Exactly. You need to be buying fully refundable tickets. Yes, they cost significantly more upfront, whether you pay in cash or points, but they are essential right now. And here's a fantastic quick tip from the sources that a lot of people don't know. Federal law in the U.S. actually guarantees a 24-hour refund window if you book a flight at least a week out.
That is a great tool to use.
So if you see a price drop, or if your plans suddenly shift within that first day, use that federal protection. Do not let the airline tell you otherwise. Third strategy. Let's talk about insurance and buffers.
This is a big one.
The sources note something incredibly important about standard travel insurance policies. Most people assume if they buy the $50 add-on insurance at checkout, they're covered for anything.
That's the trap.
But standard policies often explicitly ignore acts of war. If your trip is ruined because airspace is suddenly shut down due to a geopolitical conflict, your basic policy might not pay out a single dime.
Which is exactly why the recommendation from the experts has entirely shifted to cancel for any reason policies.
CFR policies.
Right. They carry a much higher premium, sometimes adding 10 to 15% to the total cost of the trip, but they are the only reliable, bulletproof shield against the kind of unpredictable geopolitical volatility we are seeing.
It's expensive but necessary.
Furthermore, if you are traveling for a hard date event, meaning an event that will not wait for you, like a wedding or a cruise departure that physically leaves the dock, you must build buffer days into your itinerary. You have to plan to arrive 2 days early.
I look at all this advice, and it's basically like you're building financial and logistical shock absorbers for your vacation.
Yeah.
You're paying a high premium just to insulate yourself from global chaos.
Yeah.
But let's be real for a second. Let's push back on this advice.
Okay.
Paying for fully refundable tickets and premium cancel for any reason insurance is incredibly expensive.
True.
How is the average listener supposed to finance this kind of travel buffer without doubling the cost of their trip?
It's a valid concern.
Well, our sources highlighted a very timely, very specific strategy regarding credit card points, specifically looking at the Marriott Bonvoy American Express cards.
The credit card ecosystem is highly reactive. They see the exact same data we're discussing. They know consumers are desperate for travel flexibility, and they're adjusting their incentive structures to capture that anxiety.
Right now, according to the financial reporting in our stack, there are all-time high welcome bonuses for these specific cards, valid until May 13th, 2026.
Just massive point offerings.
If you need to book refundable hotels to build that shock absorber we talked about, this is the arsenal you use. The Bevy card is currently offering 175,000 points.
Wow.
The Brilliant card, which admittedly carries a hefty $650 annual fee, gives you 200,000 points, automatic Platinum Elite status, and Priority Pass for airport lounges, which you are absolutely going to need for those inevitable airport delays we discussed.
You'll be spending a lot of time in those lounges.
Absolutely. And the business version of the card is offering a tiered bonus that nets you up to 5 free nights total, depending on your spend.
But the real strategic play here, as the financial sources point out, isn't just hoarding the points. It is utilizing Marriott's specific stay for 5, pay for 4 point hack.
Explain how that works.
If you use your points for a 5-night stay, the 5th night is completely free. So if you grab one of these massive welcome bonuses, you aren't just getting a couple of free nights, you're leveraging the points to create a massive multi-day buffer for your travel plans.
That's brilliant.
And because you are booking with points, those reservations are almost always fully refundable right up until a few days before check-in. You are using the bank's points to buy yourself the flexibility that the physical world is currently denying you.
So we have firmly established that the physical world, from the shipping lanes in the Middle East to the airspace over Mexico down to the TSA checkpoints at your local airport, is bogged down in historic, exhausting levels of friction.
Complete gridlock.
But while all that physical movement is choking and sputtering, there is an absolute fire hose of capital flowing into a space that truly believes it has no physical limits whatsoever. I'm talking about the trillion-dollar artificial intelligence hardware boom.
This is the massive pivot. We are moving from the macroeconomics of a barrel of oil to the extreme microeconomics of a silicon chip. And the numbers we are seeing projected in these sources are frankly staggering.
Staggering doesn't even begin to cover it. Let's look at the recent Nvidia GTC 2026 conference. CEO Jensen Huang took the stage and casually predicted, not hoped, predicted $1 trillion in purchase orders for their Blackwell and upcoming Vera Rubin systems here through 2027.
$1 trillion.
$1 trillion. With a T. Just for the physical infrastructure to run AI.
To give you context on why that number is so shocking, you just have to look at the sheer velocity of the technological iteration.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Just last year, analysts were projecting a $500 billion revenue opportunity for this cycle. In a matter of months, the demand profile has doubled, and it's being driven by the hardware itself. The new Vera Rubin system, which rolls out later this year, is a marvel of engineering.
What makes it so special?
It is comprised of 1.3 million individual components, and it promises to deliver 10 times more performance per watt than the previous Blackwell system.
10 times the performance per watt. And let me tell you, they're going to need every single ounce of that energy efficiency because the power demands we're about to talk about are insane.
But Huang didn't stop there.
No, he had more.
He didn't just show off Vera Rubin. He unveiled something called the Grok 3 LPU. Now, LPU stands for Language Processing Unit. Nvidia essentially bought this startup, Grok, for $20 billion last December. And they're integrating it rapidly into their ecosystem.
It's an aggressive integration.
Huang showed off a Grok LPX rack that holds 256 of these LPUs. And he claimed that when you stick this specific rack next to a Vera Rubin system, it increases the tokens per watt performance by 35 times.
I have to admit, as someone who follows this closely, the engineering architecture here is breathtaking. But to understand why this actually matters, why they were spending billions to squeeze out these specific efficiencies, you have to understand why they need this kind of unimaginable processing speed. All right, why do we need it?
We are rapidly moving past the era of simple chatbots. The era where you type a question into a box and wait 3 seconds for an answer is already over. We are entering the era of what the industry calls agentic AI.
Okay, stop right there. Break that down for me. Explain it like I'm 5. What exactly is agentic AI and why does it require $1 trillion of new hardware?
Think of it this way. A chatbot is reactive. You ask for a recipe, it gives you a recipe. Agentic AI is proactive and autonomous. It means you don't just ask the AI a question, you give it a complex goal.
Give me an example.
Let's say you tell the AI, research the top 3 travel insurance policies that cover acts of war, compare their pricing based on a 7-day trip to Europe, draft a summary email, and send it to my wife.
Okay, that sounds amazing. I want that immediately.
It is amazing, but mechanically, it is incredibly demanding. Because to execute that one prompt, the AI doesn't just generate one answer. It spawns multiple sub-agents, little autonomous AI programs.
Like it makes other AI?
Yes. One agent goes to read insurance PDFs. Another agent pulls pricing data. Another agent writes the draft. They communicate with each other, correct each other's code, test the results, and then report back to you. So one single simple prompt from a human user might generate millions or even billions of unseen tokens, which are essentially fragments of words or data, as these agents converse with each other in the background.
So the volume of data being generated just exploded exponentially.
Exactly. This creates an absolutely insatiable need for what is called inference speed. Inference is the act of the AI actually generating the answer as opposed to training the model. The current hardware literally cannot process the tokens fast enough to allow these agents to talk to each other in real time.
Ah, I see.
That is why Huang is showing off these massive jumps in tokens per watt. That is why he is showing off prototypes for an architecture called Kyber coming in 2027.
Right, the Kyber architecture.
Kyber is fascinating because it ditches the traditional horizontal server racks entirely. They are moving to vertical compute trays just so they can pack 144 GPUs closer together. Why? To lower the latency. They literally need to reduce the physical distance, the millimeters that the data has to travel through the wires.
Okay, wait. Here's where it gets really interesting and where I have to push back on this entire narrative.
Go for it.
We just spent the first 20 minutes of this deep dive talking about a global energy crisis. Oil is over $100 a barrel. We have literal navies fighting physical wars over energy choke points. The power grid is strained.
It's stretched to the limit.
How on earth do tech CEOs plan to power $1 trillion worth of new, vertically stacked, hyper-dense AI data centers when the physical grid is already choking? It sounds like they're living in a delusion.
That is the trillion-dollar question, and you are hitting on the exact friction point of this decade. The tech industry is projecting a financial and digital reality where compute is infinite. But they are running headfirst, at top speed, into the physical reality that electricity is decidedly finite.
You can't code electricity into existence.
You cannot run a vertical Kyber rack on optimism. It requires massive, continuous baseload power.
And despite that looming, incredibly obvious physical wall, the mega deals are still being inked every single day. Look at Meta. Mark Zuckerberg's company just signed a $27 billion deal with a Dutch cloud provider named Nibius.
Huge deal.
By the way, Nibius shares jumped 14% on the news. In this deal, Meta is securing $12 billion in dedicated capacity and another $15 billion in available capacity over 5 years, just to guarantee they get their hands on these new Vera Rubin chips.
They're locking it up.
Overall, Meta is planning to spend up to $135 billion in total AI capital expenditure just this year alone.
They are hoarding compute capacity the way nations hoard oil reserves. And you see other tech giants pivoting aggressively to secure their profit margins in this incredibly expensive environment.
Like Apple.
Like Apple, for instance. They just acquired a Polish video editing startup called Motion VFX. Why is a hardware giant buying a niche software startup? Because Apple is trying to boost subscribers to its $12.99 a month Creator Studio software bundle.
They want recurring revenue.
Exactly. They are leaning hard into high-margin software services to lessen their reliance on physical hardware sales, like iPhones, which are subject to the exact physical supply chain friction we talked about earlier.
So let me summarize where we are. We have Meta spending $135 billion on hardware. We have Nvidia selling $1 trillion of chips. The capital expenditure is astronomical, which brings us to the ultimate reality check.
The big question.
We are spending trillions on the hardware to generate the AI, but what is that AI actually producing in the real world right now? And is it actually worth the price tag we are paying for it?
This brings us to a very sobering, very critical analysis of the current software market.
Right. Let's look at the source from John Zito. He is an executive at the massive private equity firm Apollo. And he recently stood up in front of a room full of UBS clients and dropped an absolute bomb.
It shook the room.
He stated publicly that private equity firms are wildly misstating the value of their software holdings. His exact quote from the transcript. I literally think all the marks are wrong.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Zito is pointing out a massive, dangerous discrepancy in how the financial world is valuing technology. Publicly traded software as a service companies, the SaaS stocks that everyone knows, like Salesforce and ServiceNow, are down roughly 25% this year.
Right, they took a huge hit.
Why? Because public market investors are terrified that new autonomous AI tools from companies like OpenAI or Anthropic are going to render these traditional software platforms completely obsolete. Why pay for a massive Salesforce subscription if an agentic AI can just organize your customer data for free?
That makes sense for the public markets. They see the threat, they sell the stock. But Zito's talking about private markets.
Precisely. In the private credit markets, where massive private equity firms loan billions of dollars to smaller non-public software companies, they haven't marked down the value of those assets. They are still pretending those companies are worth what they were 3 years ago.
It's a fantasy.
They are essentially pretending the AI threat doesn't exist to protect their balance sheets.
And Zito is warning that when reality finally hits the balance sheet, lenders to these smaller software companies might only recover 20 to 40 cents on the dollar. That implies catastrophic systemic losses in private credit.
It could be a bloodbath.
And retail investors are already smelling the smoke. According to the data, they pulled $10 billion from private credit funds in the first quarter alone. And you have legendary venture capitalist Bill Gurley backing up this exact anxiety. He is openly warning of a massive AI bubble and a coming reset.
Gurley's analysis is fascinating because he relies on the economic frameworks of Carlota Perez, a scholar who studies historical technological revolutions.
How does her framework explain this?
Her theory, which has held true for the Industrial Revolution, railroads, and the dot-com boom, is that every major tech shift has two distinct phases: the installation phase and the deployment phase.
Okay, installation and deployment.
During the installation phase, a bunch of speculative capital rushes in to build the infrastructure. People get rich quick, excitement outpaces utility, and you inevitably get a massive financial bubble that bops.
And then what?
It's only later, during the deployment phase, that the surviving technology actually becomes useful to society. Gurley is saying we are absolutely in the bubble phase of AI installation. We are spending all this money on Nvidia chips, but the actual economic value to the end user hasn't materialized yet.
Which perfectly explains the rumors that Meta is quietly planning to lay off 20% or more of its workforce simply to offset the massive $135 billion bill for their AI infrastructure.
It's a harsh reality.
They are quite literally firing human beings to buy servers. But the argument from the tech optimists is always, well, the AI is making the remaining workers hyperproductive. Surely that's true, right?
Well, this raises an important question. Are we spending trillions of dollars just to automate the production of corporate mediocrity?
I love that phrasing, automating corporate mediocrity. Okay, let's look at the actual behavioral research in our sources. A recent MetLife survey of HR decision makers found that 83% say AI speeds up work.
Okay, great. Faster is better.
But in that exact same survey, 67% of those HR leaders say AI is actively creating new points of friction and mistrust in the office. 61% of workers are terrified of ethical and bias issues regarding the AI tools, and 59% are terrified their jobs are going to be made obsolete.
So immediately you see it is causing immense psychological friction, but it's also causing intensely practical day-to-day friction, leading to a phenomenon that researchers are officially calling work slop.
Work slop. It is the perfect word for a terrible phenomenon.
It really paints a picture.
Research from Stanford and BetterUp Labs defines work slop as AI-generated content that looks good but lacks substance. We have all seen this. It's the 10-page memo you get from a colleague that uses perfectly professional, grammatically flawless language, but actually says absolutely nothing of value.
Right, it's just fluff.
It's just a hallucinated word salad dressed up in a corporate suit.
And the statistics regarding how pervasive this has become are alarming. 53% of U.S. workers admit to turning in work slop, and 40% of workers say they received work slop from a colleague in the last month alone.
I mean, we've all gotten those emails where you just know a robot wrote it.
Kate Niederhofer, the chief scientist at BetterUp, points out the deeply insidious nature of this trend. AI allows an employee to generate a massive, low-effort document in 5 seconds. They feel productive. But when they send that document to a coworker, it shifts the entire burden of editing, judging, and fact-checking to the receiver.
It's a selfish way to work.
It destroys workplace collaboration because you can no longer trust the baseline effort or the factual accuracy of the work your colleagues are handing you. You have to read their 10-page memo like a suspicious auditor looking for AI hallucinations.
It's like buying a multi-million-dollar Formula One race car just so you can drive it to the end of your driveway to check the mail. We have this staggering trillion-dollar compute power. We have these brilliant Vera Rubin chips and Grok LPUs, and we're using them to spam our own coworkers with meaningless memos that they then have to waste their own time deciphering.
It's a colossal waste of energy.
We were promised a frictionless digital utopia, and instead we've just introduced a massive wave of digital friction into the workplace.
Exactly. The grand promise of AI was that it would eliminate the drudgery of white-collar work. Instead, in many very real cases, it is multiplying the drudgery by automating the creation of noise.
So let's follow the logical progression here. If white-collar desk work is drowning in a sea of AI-generated work slop, and traditional software jobs are facing an existential bubble where private credit might lose 60 cents on the dollar, what is the rational response for a worker?
Where do they go?
Right. Where do people go to find stability? According to our sources, we are seeing a fascinating cultural and economic retreat back to the physical world.
We are seeing an absolute renaissance in the skilled physical trades, and it is being driven by a demographic you might not traditionally expect.
Women. Women are bypassing the traditional four-year college debt trap, and they are actively fleeing desk jobs for careers that are entirely 100% AI-proof.
It's a huge shift.
The data in our stack shows that the percentage of female electricians has jumped from 1.9% to 3.5%. Now, obviously, that is still a very small base percentage, but it represents a massive accelerating growth trend.
And the personal stories highlighted in the reporting really illuminate the deep economic incentives driving this shift. You have women looking at the digital economy, looking at the threat of AI obsolescence, looking at crippling student loan debt, and choosing a completely different path that relies entirely on their physical capabilities.
Let's actually talk about some of these women because their stories are the antidote to the AI anxiety we just discussed. Take Christina Brillis-McEntee.
Yeah, her story is great.
She was working as a makeup artist, but she realized she wanted real stability as she got older. She took a massive short-term pay cut, making just $9 an hour as a plumbing apprentice, but she stuck with the grueling physical labor.
And it paid off.
Big time. Today, she is a fully licensed plumber in Chicago making $56 an hour, complete with a full union pension. She is on track to retire comfortably at 60. Then you have Tegan Hollabaugh, a 22-year-old heavy-duty diesel mechanic.
And a diesel mechanic at 22.
She explicitly told reporters she simply couldn't stomach the idea of sitting behind a screen all day.
Huh.
She got a high-paying job immediately out of technical college, bypassing the university system entirely.
And her twin sister, Lillian Hollabaugh, followed her right into the trades, becoming an HVAC installation technician.
I love that.
Lillian's story is particularly telling because it highlights the systemic friction these women still face. When Lillian showed up for initial job interviews dressed professionally, the interviewers kept trying to push her into an office role.
Oh, man. They just couldn't see past their bias.
They couldn't mentally compute the idea of a young woman wanting to work with her hands, hauling heavy HVAC equipment. But she fought through that bias, proved her competence, and within 2 years, she's about to become a crew lead. And she noted, very astutely regarding the tech boom we just discussed, robots are never going to be able to do what we do.
She's entirely correct. You cannot prompt an AI to crawl under a house and solder a copper pipe.
You really can't.
And then there's Rayleigh Nicholson, a 25-year-old diesel technician. She explicitly cited the debt-to-pay ratio as her primary motivation. She looked at the cost of a 4-year degree compared to the trade school and realized she could be making a highly competitive income immediately.
Which is such a smart financial calculation.
She is building a retirement account at 25 without carrying the burden of crushing student loans that define her generation.
Now, to be fair, the sources note it isn't a flawless utopia. There are massive ongoing challenges. Many of these women are the only females on their respective job sites.
Right, there's a cultural barrier.
There is a deep, documented sense of isolation, and there is a severe lack of structural mentorship when it comes to balancing the intense physical demands of the job with the realities of pregnancy and starting a family.
Which is something the industry needs to figure out.
But the sheer economic draw, the tangible, undeniable reality of fixing a physical machine in a physical space for high wages is overriding those hurdles.
And what's fascinating is that we are seeing this exact same retreat to the physical world mirrored in the corporate space. It's not just where people choose to work, it's where they choose to spend their free time. Look at Peloton.
Ah, the pandemic, darling.
During the pandemic, Peloton was the ultimate digital darling. The pitch was perfect for the era. You stay isolated in your house, you look at a digital screen, and you live in the frictionless digital ether.
But the digital ether has a ceiling. Humans are physical creatures.
Right. And the market is proving that. Peloton CEO Peter Stern just admitted on an earnings call that their highly touted, newly launched Peloton IQ line, which was supposed to use AI to revolutionize home workouts, completely missed Wall Street's expectations.
It flopped.
Consumers flat out did not want to pay a premium for more digital features on a screen. So what is Peloton doing in response? They are rapidly accelerating their commercial strategy.
Moving out of the living room.
They are launching the commercial series Bike and Tread, built via their Precor acquisition, designed specifically for high-traffic, physical, communal gyms.
What's fascinating here is the data behind the pivot. Peloton's commercial unit revenue actually rose 10%, while their overall at-home sales fell.
That's a massive shift.
They are realizing, through hard financial data, that human beings actually want to leave their houses, go to a shared physical space, and sweat around other human beings. Whether it's a woman fixing an HVAC system or a consumer riding a stationary bike in a crowded gym, the physical world is increasingly being viewed as a premium safe haven from digital inflation, AI anxiety, and societal isolation.
Right.
So we are seeing this massive, culturally significant retreat back to the physical world because the digital economy feels broken and overhyped.
Right.
But it's incredibly hard to build physical infrastructure like those new gyms or the plumbing systems or the energy grid we need for AI when the very institutions that govern our physical laws are completely paralyzed. Which brings us to Washington, D.C.
The ultimate source of gridlock. Now, before we dive into this section, I need to state something explicitly. We are diving into some highly charged political developments right now. To be 100% clear to you, the listener, we are not taking any sides here, left or right. We are strictly reporting the facts and viewpoints contained in our source material to help you understand the current landscape.
The focus here is not on ideology, it is on institutional friction. We are looking at how the gears of government are grinding against each other, completely freezing the machinery of state.
Exactly. This tension between progress and friction isn't just in markets or workplaces, it's tearing through our highest institutions. Let's start with the Department of Homeland Security. Senators Dick Durbin and Representative Jamie Raskin, who are the top Democrats on the Judiciary Committees, have sent a formal referral to Attorney General Pam Bondi.
What are they asking for?
They are demanding a perjury probe into the departing DHS Secretary Kristi Noem.
The legal allegations center on her recent testimony to Congress. Durbin and Raskin allege that Noem explicitly lied under oath regarding two things. First, that ICE detentions were violating specific court orders, and second, regarding the bidding process for a massive $220 million TV ad contract.
For their part, the DHS has fired back forcefully, calling the claims categorically false. And the political reality on the ground is that President Trump has already moved on. He fired Noem and tapped Senator Mark Wayne Mullen to replace her.
Just a revolving door.
But that's just one point of friction in the executive branch. Look at health policy. A federal judge in Boston, Brian Murphy, just completely blocked Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s massive attempt to reshape childhood vaccines in America.
The mechanics of this are important. RFK Jr. had moved to drastically cut the routine childhood vaccine schedule down to 11 shots and downgrade the official recommendation for 6 others, including the flu and hepatitis A.
That's a huge shift in public health policy.
To facilitate this, he had previously replaced all 17 independent experts on the CDC's advisory committee.
But the American Academy of Pediatrics sued immediately, arguing the regulators acted unlawfully and outside their mandate, and Judge Murphy sided with them, issuing an injunction that completely blocked the policy change. So the executive branch tries to move, and the judicial branch slams on the brakes.
Pure friction.
But the gridlock extends beyond health and borders. It goes straight to the core of the economy. The Department of Justice is currently appealing a judge's ruling that blocks subpoenas in the ongoing criminal probe of Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell.
Which creates a fascinating, highly consequential domino effect for capital markets. Because the DOJ is appealing the ruling, the legal probe into Powell is prolonged indefinitely.
Okay, follow the dominoes.
Because the probe is prolonged, Senator Thom Tillis is blocking the confirmation of Kevin Warsh, who is the man nominated to succeed Powell. Which means, practically speaking, Powell likely stays in his seat longer than anticipated.
And what does that mean for the economy?
And because Powell is historically more hawkish, by extension, interest rates likely stay higher for longer. The legal friction in a courtroom directly impacts monetary policy that dictate your mortgage rate.
It's like trying to change the tires on a car while the driver and the mechanic are violently suing each other over who actually owns the wrench. The car isn't going anywhere.
That's a perfect analogy.
And finally, you have legislative friction. President Trump is demanding the Senate pass the Save America Act, which is a strict voter ID bill requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote. He has explicitly stated he will not sign any other bills until this is passed. His quote was, "It supersedes everything else."
But the Senate math doesn't work.
The math in the Senate is brutal. Republicans only hold 53 seats, and they need 60 to overcome a filibuster. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer vehemently opposes it, calling it a horror. So the entire legislative agenda of the United States government is completely, totally jammed.
Nothing is moving.
Oh, and on a human note, amid all this political warfare, The White House announced that Chief of Staff Susie Wiles has been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. Trump reported her prognosis is excellent, and she's choosing to work virtually full-time through her treatment.
When you zoom out, it is an incredible amount of simultaneous institutional paralysis. You have the executive branch fighting the judicial branch over vaccines. You have the DOJ fighting the central bank. You have the president at a total standoff with the Senate over voting laws. The system is locked.
My question to you is, how do financial markets possibly price in this level of absolute gridlock? We always hear the old adage that markets hate uncertainty.
They do hate uncertainty, which is why volatility spikes during elections. But paradoxically, institutional investors sometimes secretly love gridlock.
Wait, really? Why?
Because gridlock provides a very specific type of certainty. The certainty that the rules of the game aren't going to change tomorrow. If Congress physically cannot pass laws and federal judges are blocking sweeping executive orders, it prevents sudden regulatory shocks.
Oh, I see.
A jam machine can't suddenly shift into reverse. It allows capital to operate in the margins without the constant fear of sudden new taxes or massive sweeping policy changes, at least in the short term. The friction creates a bizarre kind of stability.
Wow. That is a brilliant way to frame it. Okay, so how does a society actually process all of this? We've talked about a hot war over oil, intense existential anxiety about AI taking our jobs, a plague of corporate work slop ruining our offices, and total unyielding gridlock in Washington, D.C.
It's a lot of cultural stress.
Historically, societies don't process these macro anxieties through white papers. They process them through their art and entertainment. And looking at the results of the 98th Academy Awards, the Oscars perfectly, almost eerily, reflected this exact cultural moment.
It is always revealing to see what narratives resonate with voters. What's fascinating here is how clearly the film industry itself is battling the exact same macro forces as the rest of the economy, and it bleeds into the art.
It really does. Look at the big winner of the night. It was a movie called One Battle After Another. It's described as a darkly comic thriller about political resistance, starring Leonardo DiCaprio as a former revolutionary turned weed-smoking single dad.
A very specific archetype.
Right. Think about why that specific archetype, an exhausted former revolutionary, resonates right now. It took home Best Picture, and director Paul Thomas Anderson won 3 Oscars, his first wins after 11 career nominations. And in his acceptance speech, he dedicated the awards to his kids, apologizing for the, quote, housekeeping mess that we left in this world.
That is a deeply poignant reflection of the generational anxiety we were feeling regarding the geopolitics, the climate, and the broken institutions we just spent the last hour discussing.
Absolutely. And fittingly, for a movie about resistance and disillusionment, Sean Penn won Best Supporting Actor for his role as an obsessed military officer in the film. But he was a complete no-show to the ceremony. Kieran Culkin had to accept it for him.
That's very on brand for him.
Yeah, it is. The other big heavyweight of the night was a film called Sinners. It was nominated for a historic 16 Oscars and won 4. It's a supernatural vampire story set in the segregation-era South, celebrating Black culture.
It was a visual masterpiece.
It was. Michael B. Jordan won Best Actor for playing dual roles in the film, and Autumn Durald-Archipel made history as the first Black female to win the Cinematography Award.
And we saw other notable wins recognizing very complex, grounded human stories. Jessie Buckley won Best Actress for Hamnet, which is a deep exploration of grief, and Amy Madigan won Best Supporting Actress for a horror film called Weapons.
Even the animation category reflected this globalized, slightly chaotic genre-blending energy. K-pop Demon Hunters won Best Animated Feature and Best Song for a track called Golden, and Norway took International Feature for a film called Sentimental Value.
And the In Memoriam segment was pretty heavy this year.
The In Memoriam segment was particularly heavy this year, with tributes to absolute titans of the industry like Robert Redford and Rob Reiner, led by a group including Billy Crystal, Demi Moore, and Barbra Streisand, singing The Way We Were.
It was a celebration of humanity, but underneath the glamour and the speeches, the industry's deep structural anxieties were on full display for anyone paying attention.
They couldn't even hide it. Host Conan O'Brien literally opened the show by joking that he was honored to be the last human host before AI takes over the jobs.
People laughed, but
the fear of AI replacement is palpable in Hollywood right now, especially after the strikes. And the physical friction of the real world actively encroached on the Dolby Theater. Security was incredibly tight due to federal warnings of an Iranian threat against California, which is a direct physical consequence of the geopolitical conflict in the Strait of Hormuz we discussed in the very beginning of the deep dive.
The macro world always intrudes. And then there's the corporate consolidation happening behind the scenes, which perfectly mirrors the tech industry's massive mergers that we saw with Meta and Nvidia.
Right. Warner Bros., which actually swept the night with 11 total Oscars, is currently in the complex process of being sold to Paramount Skydance. A media watchdog group called Free Press actually circled the red carpet with roaming billboards protesting the merger.
They're terrified of the bottleneck.
Because what happens when you merge two massive studios? You get a bottleneck. CNBC reported that this newly merged mega studio plans to release 26 to 30 movies a year. David Ellison, Paramount CEO, wants 15 from Paramount and 15 from Warner Bros. But logistical experts are screaming that this is a total nightmare. Why is releasing 30 movies a year a bad thing?
Because of the physical limits of the calendar. There are only 52 weekends in a year. If you release 30 massive $100 million blockbusters, you are inevitably going to cannibalize your own box office ticket sales. You are competing against yourself for the limited physical attention of the audience.
It's the exact same dynamic we saw with the AI server build-out. It is massive corporate consolidation, chasing scale at all costs, while battling the deep fear of technological obsolescence. All while the physical realities of the world, in this case, the limited number of weekends in a year and the threat of global conflict outside the theater doors, impose strict, unforgiving limits on their ambitions.
It is the ultimate collision of the theoretical spreadsheet and the physical reality.
Okay, let's take a collective breath. We have covered an unbelievable amount of ground today. We started halfway across the world in the Strait of Hormuz, looking at how a physical war over a tiny island that controls 90% of Iran's oil is spiking global energy prices and forcing the U.S. to perform bizarre geopolitical gymnastics just to keep the world economy from tanking.
We tracked how that global friction trickles all the way down to your personal vacation plans, requiring you to build literal financial shock absorbers with premium credit cards and refundable tickets just to guarantee you get home.
We looked at the sheer, uncapped ambition of the tech world, pouring $1 trillion into vertically stacked AI servers, while the reality of that technology currently manifests as mind-numbing work slop that is actively destroying trust and collaboration in the modern office.
We witnessed the deeply rational retreat back to the physical world, with women finding highly lucrative AI-proof careers in plumbing and diesel mechanics, and corporations like Peloton abandoning the digital screen to return to the physical gym floor.
We navigated the paralyzing, multi-layered gridlock of Washington, D.C., where the gears of the executive, judicial, and legislative branches are entirely jammed, creating a bizarre stability for markets. And finally, we saw all those macro anxieties, war, AI fear, and corporate consolidation reflected right back at us on the stage of the Oscars.
It is a profound, messy, historic moment of transition.
So after looking at all these sources, what does this all mean?
If we synthesize everything we've discussed today, consider this one final overarching thought. We are currently spending trillions of dollars, an unprecedented amount of human capital building artificial intelligence to mimic and eventually replace human white-collar intelligence.
Right.
But as we pour money into that digital dream, actual human beings are actively fleeing those digitized desk jobs. They are moving to the skilled trades to do the complex, tactile, physical labor that AI simply cannot touch. So what happens in 10 or 15 years?
It's the real question.
What happens when the most valuable, highest paid, most indispensable people in our society are no longer the software engineers writing the code for the AI, but the electricians, the plumbers, and the HVAC technicians whose physical skills are literally required to keep the massive server farms cooled, the energy grid powered, and the physical world running? Are we on the verge of witnessing a complete historic inversion of the blue-collar and white-collar class structures?
A world where the people who work with their hands hold all the structural leverage, while the people who work with screens are fighting desperately for relevance against the machines they built. That is an incredibly provocative thought to leave on. As you go about your day, think about that heavy steel ship striking the physical mud and that weightless data packet racing through the fiber optic cable. The future isn't just about which one moves faster. It's about who actually physically controls the cable. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the friction, and we'll see you next time.